Hello there, Salim Omar here from the E-commerce MoneyMap podcast, bringing you another amazing guest. Her name is Molly Ruland. Molly, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am super excited, really looking forward to it. And before we dive into the questions, just a quick introduction to folks watching, listening to this. Molly is the CEO and founder of HeartCast Media. It's a digital content agency that focuses on personal branding for founders and brands. Molly specializes in producing high quality branded podcasts for businesses that want to generate revenues and create strategic relationships through podcasting. So Molly, let's really exciting to talk about podcasting and even on a broader basis, content. Content marketing is really powerful. Influencer marketing, content marketing. And I want to kind of hear your perspective. What is content marketing and why is it so important today more than ever?
Well, authenticity is key, right? Especially in this age of AI and not knowing what's real, what's been generated by a robot or an algorithm. And so content marketing takes that guess out of it, and it lets people know that you're really human, because content marketing is having a podcast or, creating videos, really being in front of your audience, showing people who you are, talking about the things that you care about. It's really, really hard to replace that. And from a numbers standpoint, creating any content for your business, even if it's not the owner or a talking head or something like that, the costs are significantly lower than paid advertising. Number to number, impression to impression, you spend the same amount of dollars on paid versus content marketing, you're going to see a significant jump in the numbers on content marketing than paid. So it's harder, but it's cheaper. Cheaper, I guess, is relative depending on how much time you spend on it, right? But content marketing, I think, is going to be the pillar of a lot of decision making going forward, because people want to know who they're like, what they're buying, and where is that money going, and if they can be proud of that or not.
So for an e-commerce business that's selling a product, it's more than just selling the product. There is something else. And you're saying that the buyer wants to kind of know the behind the scenes. Is that right?
Well, to even just know that it's real, right? Like, we're in this age of TikTok videos with that automated voice that people aren't even using their own voice. Like, you don't know, like, this Amazon storefront, is it a person or is it just like an algorithm that put this together? Like, is it a knockoff product? Is it real? So bringing in that authenticity back to just understand this is a real company. These are real people. So it's not even necessarily behind the scenes, but just knowing that, like, you're supporting a real business, it's a real product. It's something that's going to be there tomorrow, versus just something that was slapped together to make some money.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I feel it's one of the best ways to get away from commoditization, right? Because you can't just have a product by itself. If it stands by itself, then it's like, all right, what other products can I buy? But if there's a package around it, there's a relationship, and there's other aspects of that, it enhances the value and it differentiates that product from everyone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how would content marketing work for like an e-commerce business owner? What would that look like for an e-commerce business owner?
Well, I would say, of course, I'm always going to advocate for the podcast, but a branded podcast is an excellent way to get in front of new people. You're a prime example of that. You've got this podcast here that's opened doors for you. You're getting in front of a bunch of people, great numbers on this show. And it's all leading back to the conversation of e-commerce. You're establishing yourself as a thought leader, right? So you're doing interviews, which creates relationships with new people, opportunities for collaboration. You just never know where your next piece of business is going to come from, or your next referral. And so creating those relationships is great. Even if you don't want to do an interview style podcast, like if you're a e-commerce business owner and you're a little overwhelmed, we're seeing, as shorter podcasts have higher completion rates. And so you could do a 15-minute podcast. You could do a 10-minute podcast by yourself with just, actionable tips, thoughts, reflections on the industry, whatever it might be. And so you're getting that content, you're getting that SEO value on your website, you're getting blog posts that you can put up around those episodes, you're getting social media content, you're getting LinkedIn posts, you're getting newsletter content, LinkedIn newsletter content. So what it's doing is filling up your content calendar with authentic, content marketing assets, while also establishing yourself in this place, opening the opportunity to interview people or have just, that thought and brand leadership through your own podcast. It's an excellent and very obtainable and sustainable way to do it, especially if you do a solo podcast, because you could record 10 of those episodes at one time, hand it off to an editor who can tighten it up, clean it up, and then schedule it out for you. Now you've got 2.5 months worth of a weekly podcast, and you could do that in an hour, right? If you really know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So you see kind of podcast as the starting point, where content is essentially, that's the source for content, and then that content can be repurposed into different things.
For sure. And I kind of have a little different take on like repurposing, because you're not really repurposing. What you're doing is leveraging, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're leveraging that time you're spending, and you're creating all these assets from that cornerstone piece of content, right? So to me, it's just like, how can you maximize, right? How many slices of cake can you make out of this one pie, right? Like, how many people can you feed? And so to me, it's not necessarily repurposing, but just being really intentional and leveraging your time in the most effective way, because podcast is really a Trojan horse for SEO. And if you're an e-commerce business and you understand SEO, or you understand that you need to understand SEO, a podcast is a podcast description. A podcast episode description is just an opportunity to cram a bunch of SEO keywords into some content that you can put on your website. Yes, it's an interview. Yes, it's content. Yes, it's information and value. But on the Google domain authority SEO side, it's a Trojan horse of keywords. So if you're really intentional about it, you're getting tons of value out of it. Fresh content going on your website every week. You never know who's going to decide to buy from you or work with you or give you a big contract because they heard your podcast. So, and that domain authority, of course, is going to make a difference if you're putting consistent content up.
Great. I definitely like the word leverage compared to repurpose. So I'm going to start using that more than repurposing. For many years, I've been using repurpose. No one's corrected me, so shit that.
I'm on a mission to kill that word. Well, because I feel like it's like not doing the service to the content in the first place. It's like, well, let me take this thing and take this bad ham and turn it into ham salad. No, that's not what you're doing. You're leveraging that time appropriately and effectively.
Right. And really, I mean, that's one of the important tasks of an owner, of a CEO, is leverage, right? We've got limited resources and limited time and so forth, right? So whatever assets and resources we have, we want to optimize, we want to leverage, and you get the best ROI, return on investment, from that resource.
Exactly. Because as you know, from a podcast, you can get short video clips. You could flood your YouTube channel with shorts. You could put reels on Instagram. You could make long posts on LinkedIn. It goes on and on. You could put these things on Twitter. So you could fill an entire content calendar with content from your podcast if you're really intentional about it and juice that thing for all it's worth.
Cool. So let's kind of give us, if you don't mind, a few tips, a few strategies, a few things to keep in mind. What are like the 3 things or the 5 things somebody needs to be thinking about when they're creating their own podcast?
Have a strategy. Be really intentional, and don't worry about what everybody else is doing, because if they're already doing it, then nobody needs more of that. They need something different. So try not to compare yourself to too many people. Number 2, outsource. I always believe that you should hire somebody to help you with those things, like hire somebody to edit, hire somebody to do the graphics, especially if it's going to represent your business. You want it to look good. You want it to be consistent. Those things are important. They're very important, right? So, and take it off your plate, right? You can do your taxes too and your oil change. There's all kinds of stuff you can do yourself, but it's not really the best use of your time, right? You want to leverage that time, that limited time in the right way, outsource. It'll look better, sound better, everything else. Number 3, be very specific. I'm a huge fan of doing 12 very intentional strategic podcast episodes and getting every bit of content and leverage out of it possible versus doing 70 episodes that don't have good metadata and don't have blog posts and weren't promoted properly and all of that. Like, you're not doing, like, it's not the gym. Like, reps are not the most important thing when it comes to content creation, right? Number 4, quality over quantity for sure. A bad podcast is a bad podcast. It just is, it just is. And so, focus on the content and focus on creating value for the people who are listening.
What's good frequency?
I mean, if you could do, well, again, I'm a fan of doing a limited amount of episodes, 12, 15, 20, have a name to it, have a season, have a theme to it, have a goal, an intention with it. And if you can record those, get ahead of them on the schedule and do a weekly thing for 12, 15, 20 weeks and really dial in on the marketing and really just flood the market, that's going to be the most effective. But that's not always optional for people. Once a month is kind of a long time to go in between. A lot can change in a month. People can forget about you. Bi-weekly is the next best thing, but weekly is definitely better. As I mentioned, if you're like, that's impossible. Well, what if you did a 7-minute podcast, right? Like, we all have good days and bad days. And there's some days I'm feeling very prophetic and I could just crank out a bunch of episodes. And other days I'm like, I don't have it in me, right? So, or maybe I'm too busy. I'm in meetings all week. I don't have the bandwidth for this, right? So you can batch those out and then it becomes a lot more sustainable.
Super good. So I want to shift gears and kind of just talk about business and life philosophy, if we can. Yeah. So a couple of years back, you moved from the Northeast to a very cool place called Costa Rica. Why did you move? And because, I want to kind of go there because I feel like, when people get into e-commerce, they want to create a lifestyle and they don't want to, they want to enjoy their life and they want to create and make money and serve people and all that while enjoying their life. So kind of just from personally, what led you to make that shift?
Well, they say that getting what you want is easy, but knowing what you want is the hard part. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And so I spent some time thinking about what it is that I want. And the pandemic pushed me all the way over that ledge. I had a brick and mortar recording studio in downtown Washington, D.C., prime location, the largest attorney or law firm in the city was our number one client. I mean, we were all the way in, and the pandemic happened, and I was forced to, look at, hey, this might not be a couple weeks, this might not be a month, I don't know if you remember in the beginning, but it was wild times, and I knew that the world wasn't going to be the same, but I had no idea what was going to happen. But we focus on podcasting as a business development tool. And I knew that would continue to be a need for my clients. And so we just figured out how to go remote and do it better than everybody. We learned the Zoom settings faster than everybody. We got other platforms, 4K platform. We just constantly evolved. And we were able to grow the business 200% without a physical location. And that just took the handcuffs off, not having to be in DC. And I had always wanted 10 years out to have a remote income. But before the pandemic, that was kind of a crazy thing to even really think about. You really had to be a Tim Ferriss kind of outlier to think about remote income, before the pandemic. And so I thought it was way, way out. But then that happened and it forced me to take my very, very physical brick and mortar business and turn it into something that didn't have any walls. And we did it. And so I just made the decision, instead of waiting 10 years to move to Costa Rica when I might not be able to enjoy it, why not go now? Because here's the rub. what if I don't like it? What if I have this vision of what I want to do when I retire, or what it means, but I've never actually spent any time there. I don't even know if I like it. I see people move to Costa Rica all the time. They last 2 years, they go back. They can't handle waiting 4 days for somebody to call them back. They can't handle, XYZ of what it means to live in Costa Rica, right? And so why delay happiness? Why delay what you want? I decided that I want to spend the rest of my life looking at beautiful things, and I'm willing to work real hard to get it. And so that's how I ended up in Costa Rica. And it's a challenge at times, but my business is now international. My business has grown considerably. I still work a lot. I just have a nicer view from my desk than I used to.
Nice. That's great. You made it happen. From in terms of business, what are some things that have helped you, business philosophies, things you keep in mind to run a business, to grow a business, to make it profitable, and then that. So what have been some business lessons for you?
For sure. Well, I decided to become a student of business, actually, and I read like 135 books in the last 4 years on business development. And the biggest takeaway that I got, that I remind myself of constantly, is take the straightest path to the money. And I think a lot of times in business is like, oh, start a Facebook community and get 7,000 people in there and nurture them and do all that. It's like, no, man, that is not the straightest path to the money. And we just have to boil things down sometimes, make it easy for people to buy your products on your website, right? Like remove the obstacles between you and the money, whatever that looks like in your business. And the second thing is, decide what you want and go for it, because life happens fast, and life is really hard. And the only way that you can really do that is if you build really solid systems in your business. So if you're somebody who's afraid of systems or automations, or doesn't want to understand how your business works, I feel like that is a much better use of your time than trying to go viral on TikTok or Instagram or anything like that, because the only way your business can ever scale, and the only way you can live a lifestyle where you aren't working all the time and you can be anywhere you want, is if your business can scale and grow without you, right? And you can't do that without systems. So that would be my best advice. Get real comfortable with systems and take the straightest path to the money.
Love that. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty solid. And I like that, that clarity, right? The straightest path, because we get, straightest path to the money, because then it makes decision making easier, not only for ourselves, our team, and so forth. It's like, all right, what are we doing? What we are doing now, is that the straightest, easiest, fastest path to the money? And if it's like going around, then it's like, all right, how do we streamline it? How do we make it efficient so that it is? That's great. Good. What else should I ask you, Molly, that I did not, that you are just like burning to share with us?
Well, leadership. I'll say leadership. If you're not educating yourself on how to be a better leader, and you're a business owner, then you will fall behind. And I say that as somebody who's a failed leader, right? I get it wrong all the time. I get it right every once in a while, but I get it wrong a lot too. And I think the greatest service you can give yourself as a business owner is to read books on leadership, because it'll make you a better business owner. It'll make you a better person.
Yeah. So 130 books last 4 years. Which were some of the best ones?
Oh, I love this
What's
question.
Your top list?
Well, of course, the 4-Hour Work Week. Tim Ferriss just set me on the whole. That's if you want to, I got to Costa Rica. Tim Ferriss would be the short answer. Alex Hormozi's $100 million offers. Read that book like 6 times now. There's books I've read, and then there's books I've studied, right? And those two I've studied. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. It's another one that I've studied. I read that once a year because it's a great tune-up. And the One-Page Marketing Plan by Alan Dibb. It's just it's an old school book, but he says something in that book that triggered me to create this life that I'm living now. He said, if you have a business that you can't walk away from for 6 months and come back and it still exists, you don't have a business, you have a very expensive hobby. And I just hurt because at the time I couldn't leave my business for 6 minutes without something catching on fire, right? I had a business that was not sustainable. And that really sunk in with me. And so when I formed HeartCast Media, I decided I was going to build a business from the systems up. So that way I could go away for 6 months if I needed to, and the company would still run and the company would still make profits because I'm not pushing the boulder uphill every single day. And so it's
the systems are.
Yeah.
The systems are.
You know, and everything's automated. You book a podcast with us, you're giving us all the information. A form is automatically created. It's sent to the team on Trello, Slack. I get a notification. They've all been added to the card. The work starts. I'm not even involved. You know what I mean? I can come off this podcast, open my email. I might have closed some deals and they might have already paid me because I made it easy for people. So I spent the first year of my business building the systems, you know, with zero, you know, not too many clients to put them into. But then when the clients came, my system could handle it. My system could still handle it. Those things I set up are still functional 4 years later. So that's a big Tim Ferriss thing. But the Alan Dibb book, it's just a great book on customer service. And it's just basics. It's you reading and you go, yeah, Alan, you're right. You know, you're right. And I think in this day and age of AI and this and the new shiny object, it's like, no, people, your customers, man, it's always your relationship and your customers. That's what makes everything, you know? And so get back to the basics of serving your clients and caring about your customers and your products and how to do that in an effective way. So those are my top 3 or 4. I don't know how many I named, but I could go on, but I won't bore you.
Yeah, right. No, that's a great, that's a great list. And yeah, I'm totally, I'm a reader, and yeah, I totally believe in the importance of reading and, you know, constantly every day, every week, doing that. This is good, man. I'm loving it. This is really some good information, Molly, that you've shared with us. What's the best way for folks who want to reach out to you?
My website, which is heartcastmedia.com, like heart, and cast, like podcast, heartcastmedia.com. We've got contact forms and social links, all that stuff. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, you know, Molly Ruland, super easy to find there. I love discovery calls. I love chatting with people. I love strategy. So if somebody has any questions on maybe how a podcast could work with them, I'd be happy to jump on a call and give them very specific examples on how they could get ROI from a podcast in less than 15 minutes. So
that's awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. This is good.
Thank you.
You take care.
Yeah, you too.